What lies beneath the world's most famous cities? In incredible catacombs, subterranean secrets are brought to light. We bring you the underground chapel fit for a musical virtuoso. We reveal the world's most unusual and deathly decor. The secrets buried below the world's most amazing landscapes. And Europe's most haunted vaults.
I have an eerie feeling that something's going to happen.
Incredible Catacombs unearths all this and more next. We may be familiar with the world's treasures above the ground, but what about the gems hidden down below? Catacombs.
Catacomb is an underground burial place carved out of the bedrock by the early Christians as a place to put their dead.
It is also the name that describes any cavernous space underground. And in Incredible Catacombs, we visit the world's greatest underground secrets. When we think of ancient Rome, we think of the Romans, of gladiators and combat, the Roman Empire, and an ancient city filled with palaces, meeting places, and a world-famous fighting arena. But there is more to Rome than meets the eye. It was also the home of the early Christians, many of whom died for their religious beliefs at the hands of the Romans. But where and how were they buried?
They couldn't afford to buy large plots of land to make giant cemeteries and things like this, so instead you buy a small plot of land and then dig down.
Extraordinarily, while the Romans were building their massive empire, the Christians were digging subterranean burial spaces with their bare hands. The original catacombs.
So the catacombs are underground burial chambers dug for the early Christians here in Rome.
There was a law in ancient Rome that said you couldn't bury your dead inside the city walls, so the Christians dug catacombs all around the outskirts of the city. We visited San Calixtus, the most extensive of the catacombs of Rome.
San Calixtus is really impressive for the size. It's the largest of these catacombs. The passages carry on for about 12 miles. It covers a space of about 90 acres. And at its height, it could have held up to 500,000 bodies.
San Calixtus is most famous for being the burial place of 16 popes. And this is the room where 9 of them were laid to rest. Some of the ancient popes were martyrs, killed by the Romans because they refused to recant their belief in just one God. The most famous of the martyr popes was Saint Sixtus. He was caught by the Romans celebrating a secret mass here, inside the catacomb itself.
When the Roman soldiers get word that the Pope is down there celebrating this mass, they come pouring in through the entranceways and actually slaughter everyone on the spot.
The catacomb's second most famous martyr is Saint Cecilia. She was executed after converting many pagans to Christianity with her beautiful singing.
She was decapitated, not entirely. They did it with a sword, so they couldn't get her head all the way off.
Her body was laid to rest inside the catacomb, and here is an incredible secret. Years later, when her tomb was reopened, Saint Cecilia's body hadn't decayed. This statue shows how she was found lying in this position, with her hands telling an important story.
She had 3 fingers together on her right hand to signify the Trinity of the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, and on the other hand, 1 finger raised to represent there is but one God.
Ironically, the catacombs went out of use once Christianity stopped being an underground religion. They are now simply a historical monument to the religion's ancient past. And in case you were wondering about the human remains,
the bones were actually later taken away because tourists, basically, of the last few years would come by and actually take bones home to be relics or just souvenirs.
Perhaps the most amazing thing of all is that San Calixtus is just one of the 60 purpose-built underground cemeteries that have been discovered in Rome so far, making this Catacomb City. Our next stop is Paris, the capital city of France. World-renowned for its distinguished monuments and architecture, it is widely considered to be the European destination to live and die. Paris is home to some of the world's most exclusive cemeteries. Famous figures from across the globe have chosen this city as their final resting place. Included among them are poet and playwright Oscar Wilde and frontman of rock group The Doors, Jim Morrison. In Paris, the celebrity dead have become unlikely tourist attractions for their living fans.
People have always, I guess, come to Paris not only for the city of lights that it is above ground, but also the experience of death that you can have.
The city's deathly attractions do not end up above. Buried deep underground is a macabre secret that many Parisians know nothing about. 60 feet below the most romantic city in Europe is the Empire of Death. Spanning over 100,000 square feet, the Paris catacombs house the bones of an estimated 6 million Parisians. That's 3 times the living population of central Paris today. In these catacombs, human bones have been organized to form a mile-long route of sinister streets and squares.
6 million dead people is so much to comprehend that it almost has to be organized in some way. And so if you have to use the stronger leg bones and the skulls for decorations and things just to give it a bit of a feel anyway that there's some control over it, so be it.
Every year, around 250,000 people visit the Paris catacombs. They pay $6 each to come on terror tours among the city's dead. This is not a new phenomenon. Ever since the catacombs first opened in the 18th century, people have come here to stare death right in the face. Tour guide Ira Spencer explains this historical fascination.
This was a time when most French people were Catholic, and the Catholic doctrine at that time was such that the more time they spent thinking about death during their lifetime, the less time they would have to spend in purgatory.
So what are the expectations of today's visitors at the beginning of their deathly day out?
I guess it's unusual to think of dead people as a tourist attraction, but here we are, and they are.
As long as anything doesn't fall down or nothing jumps out, things will be okay.
And so they begin their creepy tour.
The bones are organized quite nicely down here. The people who were organizing these bones had a bit of a macabre sense of humor sometimes, and they made some humorous formations, including this heart shape here made of skulls. So we're below the metro system, we're below the sewer system, and all this is water that's managed to seep down and land on your head. So here's for a tearful souvenir.
The water was pretty gross when it drops on you. I mean, you don't know where it comes from, so.
I'm amazed how they sort of compress them all so tightly together, and they're all so uniform. They all look so the same.
These are the remains of people who once lived and were grieved over, now grouped together anonymously below the earth.
You forget that they're bones because there's so many of them, so it's not as serious as it probably would be if there were fewer and they each had their own story.
Remarkably, the reason behind the construction of the Paris catacombs is even more disturbing than the tour itself.
When the decision was made to move the bones down here, the cemeteries of Paris were in an awful state.
After 1,000 years of burials, the ground inside the cemeteries had actually lost its ability to decompose bodies.
So when the bodies were buried in the long trenches, they stayed and they rotted and they smelled, and the smell went over the walls of the cemetery and into the city.
And it gets worse.
In 1780, there was a collapse of one of the walls, and this collapse spilled a whole flood of bones into the cellar of one of the houses that stood right next to the cemetery, into the wine cellar, ruined the whole thing. The fumes ruined the house, and that was it. Enough was enough.
A new home had to be found for Paris's downtown dead, and the Paris catacombs were born. They took their names from the Christian catacombs of Rome. But while Rome's were specifically built as underground cemeteries, the Paris catacombs are found inside a vast network of underground tunnels that was already there. Ancient limestone mines. Although there are official tours here, the catacombs have always attracted uninvited guests.
It used to be, as we would walk through the walls of bones here, that every once in a while you'd look and you'd see something glinting, and you'd actually see that it was a wine bottle that someone had left behind from a party they'd thrown the night before.
If you plan on coming here, you need to follow 3 simple rules. Number 1,
Don't lean back.
People often forget where they are and lean against the fragile bones. You don't want one of these stacks to tumble. Number 2.
Don't wander off alone.
A porter from a local hospital once snuck into the catacombs on his lunch break and disappeared. His body was eventually found 11 years later. And number 3.
Don't take home souvenirs.
Unbelievably, on most tours, visitors try to take home a bone or a skull as a souvenir, but they're always caught.
They make you open your bag and look inside, and if there's something in there that they know you're not supposed to have, they'll either take the bone out, and if it's a small one, they'll just set it aside, or if it's a whole bunch of them, they actually make you do the walk of shame back down and put those things right back where they were before when you found them.
The Empire of Death represents just a fraction of the 156 miles of mine tunnels that are hidden below Paris, the largest catacomb network under any city in the world. Plenty of room, then, for the next century's dead. Coming up on Incredible Catacombs, the hidden chapel with acoustics fit for a musical virtuoso.
That was incredible. I had chills while listening to him. Incredible.
And an underground room for some secret fun.
We would have guessed we'd been able to do all of this, 400 feet underground?
Our next stop on Incredible Catacombs takes us to Wieliczka in Poland, a small town 10 miles outside of Krakow. But what's hidden here? Buried beneath this wintry setting is this magnificent and stunningly decorated chapel.
This is one of the most amazing cathedrals I've ever seen. This is just gorgeous.
And it is hidden beneath this simple building, more than 300 feet below the surface in the underground caverns of the Wieliczka mine.
Everything you can see here was dug out by hand. We don't have natural caves here. Everything was man-made. Absolutely everything.
And here's the real surprise. It's the only chapel in the world where you can lick everything in sight.
Everything you can see, you can use for your dinner.
Why? It's all made of salt. Everything. The floor tiles, the stairs, works of art, all salt. Even this elaborate 2,500-piece chandelier is made of salt crystals. 20,000 tons of rock salt had to be removed to create the Chapel of St. Kinga, and the decorations were carried out by just 3 miners in their spare time. They began their masterpiece in 1896 and completed it 67 years later.
Just imagining miners carving this in their free time is unbelievable.
The Chapel of St. Kinga isn't the only place of worship inside the mine. It is one of 40 chapels, all designed and built by the religious miners.
The work of miners was dangerous, very dangerous. Centuries ago, there were cave-ins, there were floods, or fires. So to pray for the safety of the work, they carved churches in the mine.
They would pray for safety before and after each shift underground. Nick, Renata, and Jenny are coming for a tour of the salt mine. A group of American students from the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, they want to pay their respects. Money generated from the sale of salt in the 14th century was used to build their very place of learning. Back then, salt had the same value that silver has today. So the students have come to discover the mine's amazing riches. Their first surprise is the elevator, a 440-foot drop in pitch darkness.
Oh my goodness. This is kind of scary. That was intense. Felt like I was on a theme park ride.
At the start of the tour, they're a little confused.
I didn't think it'd be all gray salt. You
Yeah.
think of salt, you think of white salt.
The salt caverns and statues throughout the mine get their color from the other minerals that are found inside the rock. However, the students soon find something that looks a little more familiar.
You can see salt here. It's very easy to break. It's salty, absolutely. You can taste it. It's absolutely salt.
The Wieliczka salt mine has been in continuous use for over 700 years. Nowadays, though, miners work here to preserve it as a tourist attraction. Visitors follow a mile-long subterranean route covering the 3 upper levels. And as today's visitors continue on their day out, they find plenty of secret opportunities to have fun, all of them underground. Remarkably, there is a giant room in the mine where locals throw parties and play sports. And after working up an appetite, they can even dine in an underground restaurant.
I don't know, I have to say I never thought I'd be eating 45 stories below the Earth's surface. That's pretty crazy.
The students aren't the only ones visiting the salt mine today. Wieliczka has a VIP visitor. World-famous violinist Nigel Kennedy has come to perform here, putting the acoustics of the mine's celebrated chapel to the test.
Amazing place.
And a select audience has gathered, ready to hear the master at work. The piece is a prelude written by Nigel Kennedy himself and is inspired by the devastation suffered by Poland's Jews during World War II. It is aptly played at the mine as the Nazis used a Jewish workforce to build aircraft parts here before sentencing many of them to their deaths at Auschwitz. The prelude evokes the spirits of the Jewish people who were killed.
What's amazing about it is, playing just a violin alone, all of the notes are hanging there, and there's a purity to the sound. And it's amazing to be playing so far underneath the ground and finding such a beautiful acoustic.
That was incredible. I had chills while listening to him. Incredible. Most famous violinist.
Yeah, who would have guessed we'd been able to do all of this, 400 feet underground?
The final secret, though, is that all you've seen here is just the tip of the iceberg. There are actually 155 miles of passageways in the mine.
To see everything, you have to spend in the mine about 3 months.
Coming up on Incredible Catacombs, the hidden secrets of the most magical place on Earth.
Cappadocia is just a fantasy world. It's just unbelievable.
And the world's most terrifying church. Kutna Hora in the Czech Republic is a small town with a big, dark surprise. A secret that divides public opinion.
It's very creative and
it is.
Kind of beautiful.
I think it's very disrespectful.
It's art.
What they're talking about is hidden in the underground crypt of this small church. The church's cemetery has been reused, and the old bones moved inside.
There are bones of 40,000 bodies here in these walls.
In 1870, the Czech authorities commissioned a local woodcarver named Francis Rent to reorganize the bones that had been stored inside the 14th century All Saints Chapel. And this is what he came up with. He decorated the chapel with mortal remains, and he didn't work alone.
At this time, he had his wife and his children help him using chemicals to bleach the bones and rearrange them throughout the chapel.
Like all proud artists, Francis Rent put his name to his masterpiece, but he was no ordinary sculptor and signed his name in bones. The pièce de résistance, though, is up above. Suspended from the ceiling is a chandelier like you have never seen before.
The chandelier was made using every bone of the human body.
The use of skeletons for art affects people in different ways.
There's just bones everywhere. And did they used to have services in here while the bones were on the walls?
These are the inner parts of individuals, and I think they deserve a rather more respectful ending, if you like.
I don't know what I'm going to do with my photos, whether they're too spooky to actually keep.
So why were the bones moved inside in the first place? In the 13th century, a local abbot went on a mission to Jerusalem. He returned with a handful of dirt from the place where Christ was said to have been crucified.
When he came back to the monastery from the Holy Land, he sprinkled the dirt in the cemetery. People came from all over, from as far away as Poland and Germany, to die in a cemetery and to be buried next to a piece of Christ.
Then, in 1318, the plague hit Kutna-Hora, and a vast number of its inhabitants died. To accommodate so many new corpses, existing graves were emptied to make space for new bodies. So many bones were moved into All Saints Chapel that they eventually stopped using it as a church. Instead, it became a storeroom for bones, and it is now a major Czech tourist attraction. The mixing of so many body parts suggests that in death, all are equal. But underneath the chandelier lies a secret. There's a sealed door to a separate crypt that nobody can enter. It is exclusively for the wealthier dead.
Even though all are equal before God, there's even still a separation between those who are a little more equal and those who aren't quite as equal.
So would these guides like to end their days in All Saints Chapel?
I wouldn't like to be here as a skull or as bones, but on the other hand, I can say that it's art.
No matter how visitors react to Kutna-Hora's terrifying bone church, there is no doubt that the skeletons are here to stay, on display. Our next stop on Incredible Catacombs is the Cappadocia region in central Turkey. Cappadocia has a landscape that seems to have been lifted from another world. We go beneath this magical region to reveal its hidden depths.
Cappadocia is just a fantasy world. It's just unbelievable. It's something that I think most people don't know about.
On first arriving here, tourists should take in the sights from above. This phenomenal landscape was formed 30 million years ago by a volcanic eruption. Over time, much of the volcanic ash, known as tufa, wore away, leaving behind these incredible natural towers. The softness of this rock made the region a perfect location for ancient settlers who came to Cappadocia and dug in.
They carved their churches, chapels, monasteries, everything out of these soft volcanic rocks.
They came to be known as fairy chimneys. We found out why.
Especially at the night time, when it is really quiet, if you get close to these rock formations, you can hear very strange sounds came up by the wind.
Ancient civilizations were mystified by these unusual wind noises and said they were the sounds of fairies.
Certainly when you're down on the ground, you get one perspective of the fairy chimneys, but when you're up there, it's just completely different perspective. So it's fairly amazing.
The magic of Cappadocia is not just above the surface. To truly experience the region, you need to go underground. So far, 36 subterranean cities have been discovered in the Cappadocia region, developed by Christian inhabitants almost 2,000 years ago. They came to the region to escape Roman persecution. Although they built towns above ground, they also constructed elaborate hiding places down below, creating rooms, churches, and even schools, all underground. Derinkuyu is the biggest and most visited of the underground cities. At full capacity, 25,000 people could have hidden here, safe from marauding invaders. With these stone doors, they could keep the Romans at bay.
One or two soldiers were just pushing on the sides, and they were rolling the door to the right. To lock these doors up, they needed small piece of stones, and they were putting these stones behind of the doors, just right here. then in that way, no one could roll it back from the outside.
And by creating an underground maze, the Christians made it very difficult for their attackers to find their way around.
The fact that people lived down here, and I think the population was 10,000, 20,000 people, just stunning, stunning.
And if modern-day visitors really want to live the underground experience, they can stay in one of the 12 rooms of the region's premier cave hotel. Each of the museum hotel's ancient rooms is a restored 1,000-year-old cave.
Waking up in the morning and having breakfast at the top of Cappadocia, seeing all the hot air balloons are flying and birds are, singing, it is incredible in the morning.
Christian catacombs with creature comforts. Coming up, we visit the underground streets where a little girl's ghost looks for peace.
For those who believe, undoubtedly they see ghosts and they're there.
And we follow a gang of thrill seekers as they spend the night among the dead.
I have an eerie feeling that something's going to happen.
The much-visited city of Edinburgh may be the tourism and cultural capital of modern-day Scotland, but how many of its visitors know what lies beneath these cobbled streets? Hidden beneath the famous ancient city is a subterranean world that is said to be rich with ghosts and secrets.
You'll actually find that most places in Edinburgh can lay claim to having some kind of ghost or other. It's been called many times the most haunted city in Britain.
The 18th century South Bridge is our first haunted location. Although it is a busy thoroughfare for both traffic and tourism, not everyone knows about its hidden depths.
Most people who walk over it have no idea that they're on a bridge. There's one point where you can actually look over the side and you can see one of the archways of the bridge. What nobody knows is that there's another 19 arches completely hidden, stretching for about 250 yards.
Beneath the 19 arches, there are a series of hidden vaults, many of which were closed off at the beginning of the 19th century and only rediscovered after 200 years. They are now used by a local company as the site for their spooky tours.
The place where we're standing now is in the underground vaults beneath the South Bridge of Edinburgh. A labyrinth of tunnels and passageways and underground rooms.
The vaults were workshops for the stores up above. Some unlucky workers even lived in these gloomy conditions.
It was a place of awful disease and poverty.
The vaults were damp, they were dirty, they were dark. It was a den of vice and villainy.
And the spirits of those who lived and died down here are said to remain.
One of the reasons that the people attribute places to having ghosts is if it has a bad history. And the vault certainly did. If you go into them when it's dark, you can easily see why people get spooked out by them.
We'd been taking people down here in groups for about 6 weeks before one person saw a ghost. And it really just continued from there. About 2 weeks later, somebody else told us that they'd seen a ghost. And so on, and so on, and so on.
Every day, ghost hunting tourists visit the vaults by the dozen to put their nerves to the test. Today, Becky Key and her 3 friends have come to hear one of the vault's most terrifying tales. The story of an unfortunate male visitor and a very malevolent ghost.
There would have been someone standing near the back of the group. And as he was standing towards the back wall, he felt a very irritating draft on the side of his neck. Then as he looked about him, he realised that it wasn't a constant stream of air at all. It actually moved very, very slowly, in and out. He could actually smell the person that was breathing on him. And then this breath continued to move around his face, in and out, in and out. And then to his horror, it started to whisper. Get out! That he screamed at the top of his lungs, ran as quickly as he could out of the vaults, and he was closely followed by the rest of the group and the tour guide as well.
And he isn't the only ghost that is supposed to live in the vaults. There is also a small scampering dog, a playful child who pulls at visitors' clothes, and the heavy footsteps of an unknown man.
It was creepy. I don't know how people go down there every day knowing that there's stuff down there that is that scary.
They were a little too realistic for my taste. I thought it'd be like someone jumped out and said boo, but no, there's actual like documented accounts of these things happening.
But Becky and her friends are no ordinary tourists. They have chosen the vaults as the ideal place for a creepy sleepover.
Now, as I understand it, you're actually going to be spending the night down here in these rooms. Would that be right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure how spooky it will be like tonight, so I'm sure something crazy is going to happen, but as of now, I don't think I'll be too afraid.
I could picture myself down there, you know, feeling the breath on the back of my neck and just being totally scared.
Anything could happen when people are here. If somebody's daft enough to spend the night here, then all I can say is good luck.
Later that night, back under the South Bridge, the four friends are ready for their spooky challenge. We put a camera in with them to see how they coped.
I have a journal and I wrote, if anyone else is reading this, it's because I'm gone. It was like a will. It was really quite depressing, and when I finished it, I was shaking.
The sleepover starts off lightheartedly, until an hour later, when something unexpected happens.
No, Corey, no, that's the bad corner, the bad corner.
What the friends don't know is that we've decided to really test their nerves. We've rigged their lantern so it switches off whenever someone moves or leaves the room. Will they realize it's a trick?
So we were just in here, and Corey went into this corner, and when he got over there, the lantern went out. It just went out. No one touched it.
An hour later, and the light goes off again. It's 1:45, and they've been scared out of the vault.
That was just the creepiest thing, and it just happened so regularly and without fail.
I would no way spend the whole night down there. That was enough, I'm convinced.
We told the friends that a trick had been played on them, but they still chose to spend the rest of the night tucked up in bed. No real ghosts this time, just some phantomly fun. 500 yards from the vaults, we uncover another part of Edinburgh's underground experience. A warren of 17th century streets that are literally buried beneath the city hall. The streets are collectively known as Mary King's Close, an old Scottish word meaning alleyway. Visitors here are able to explore streets and homes that have been captured in time. A place where people lived, worked, and even kept their cattle, all underground. But Mary King's Close was not always buried beneath the earth.
The tops of the streets were simply chopped off, and they used the foundations.
The city chambers was built over these closes, and they have been preserved beneath because of that.
The Close also has a much darker history to tell. In 1645, Scotland was struck by a devastating plague epidemic, in which nearly half the population of Edinburgh perished. This exhibition shows how many of the infected were quarantined in their homes and eventually died.
Hundreds of people within the street were said to have the disease. There was barely a family that escaped its clutches.
They had to put out a stake with a piece of white fabric hanging on it to let people know that the plague was there.
The sight of so much death and grief, it is little surprise that the Close has passed into legend and has its own incredible ghost story to tell.
There is a room called, or commonly known as, the Little Girl's Room, because of a ghost story. In 1992, a Japanese psychic came to Edinburgh, and when she went in there, she said that it was the unhappiest place she had ever been.
And what she saw was the ghost of a little girl, and she was crying, and the medium asked her why, and the little girl said, "Because they put me here." And the story emerged that she had the sickness, she had the plague, and they'd put her inside the quarantine. And when they took her from her home, they wouldn't let her go back and fetch her doll.
Moved by this sad tale, the medium went out and bought a new doll for the little girl and left it in the room.
And ever since then, people from all over the world have come to Emergencies Up Close and left gifts for her. And the room's filled with dolls and teddies and books and sweeties and hair slides and all sorts of things.
And the little girl ghost is said to have finally found peace. So is Edinburgh a city of spirits? Or is it all in the overactive imaginations of its superstitious visitors?
What we tend to find is those people who believe in the paranormal anyway and believe that ghosts are real, they're the people who are more likely to actually experience ghosts in the vaults. People are seeing what they want to see.
For those who believe, undoubtedly they see ghosts and they're there.
The only real way to find out is to visit and put your own nerves to the test. Coming up on Incredible Catacombs, the deathly tourist attraction that people are fighting to see.
This is not a place for people with queasy stomachs or for the faint-hearted.
And the terrifying burial practices of Italy's Capuchin monks.
I thought I was going to see monks working or something like that. I didn't think I was going to see monks plastered on the walls.
Rome, Italy, one of the tourism hotspots of Mediterranean Europe. Each year, millions of people visit these busy streets and squares for a taste of style and glamour. This really is the place to live and be seen. Unless, that is, you get too close to one of these guys. They are part of the order of Capuchin monks and the custodians of Rome's most terrifying underground surprise.
It's probably one of the best kept secrets of the tourist trail, because a lot of people know about it, but there's many people who don't.
Introducing the crypt of the Capuchins and the bones of their unburied brothers.
I thought I was going to see monks working or something like that. I didn't think I was going to see monks plastered on the walls.
In the 16th century, the Capuchins had to move here, to the Church of the Immaculate Conception, leaving their old church behind. But they found it difficult to say goodbye to their dead brothers.
Rather than leave their brothers in that place, they said, we'll take them with us.
The number of bones that makes up this macabre display runs into the thousands. But is there a method to the artist's apparent madness?
I don't think there's any particular significance in the fact that here we have thigh bones, next door we might have skulls, in another place we might have pelvises as the dominant bone. It's just that he had so many bones, and he hit on this way of using them in an artistic way.
And the artist used everything he could get his hands on, even teeth.
I've actually seen people, especially English-speaking people, come into here, they take one look and they say, ugh, and they go out, they can't stand it.
I feel a little queasy now after coming out. A lot of it was really beautiful, but you get to the end and it kind of hits close to home.
So what did the artist want people to think when he constructed this gruesome display? The crypt represents the triumph of life over death, using the very materials that death provides, bones. And these mortal remains are intended to make observers reflect on things of a more spiritual nature.
It is Christian belief that death is not the end of the story, and in fact there's something much more marvelous to come.
Some of the dead monks are even positioned standing up, to show that they were prepared for the resurrection. So who was the Capuchin craftsman responsible for this alarming art?
We don't know exactly who the artist is. There are various theories, but he's just remained unknown to this day.
It could even be the case that the artist himself is somewhere on these walls. Further to the south of Italy, in Palermo, we uncover an even more macabre secret of the Capuchin monks. Underneath this hot, carefree paradise is a hidden catacomb and the most terrifying display of death you were ever likely to see.
This is not a place for people with queasy stomachs or for the faint-hearted. It's really an open-air cemetery.
There are more than just skeletons in these catacombs. There are mummies, too. 8,000 of them. Unbelievably, this is one of the most popular tourist attractions in Palermo, with around 300,000 eager visitors each year. So how did this strange burial practice begin?
These monks had been burying their dead underground for a long time, and they noticed that after a year or two, when they opened the grave up, these bodies were well preserved. And that had to do with the fact that the stone is very porous and it absorbed the fluids, the liquids of the bodies.
When Palermo's aristocracy heard about the Capuchin's discovery, they found it strangely appealing and wanted to be mummified themselves.
They felt that they had to hold on with all their power to worldly things, to all they possessed. So holding on to death was a way of holding on to what they had, of showing off all their riches, their wealth.
The secret of preserving most of the bodies here lies in vinegar, but the wealthier ones got pickled in arsenic, keeping them in better condition for longer. Once the bodies were pickled, the relatives of the deceased would come and visit.
You know, they would say, well, let's go see how Uncle Giuseppe is doing, and well, maybe we should change his shirt, let's brush out his hair a bit. Well, he's not doing too bad, the skin's still on, the arms come away. Anyways, it was very, very grotesque.
This is one of the more famous residents of the catacombs, wearing clothes that were very stylish at the time. Pickled with arsenic, even his eyes have been well preserved. Many female visitors feel uncomfortable around him and say they feel his eyes following them around the room.
I personally prefer not to look at him at all. I just pass by.
The practice of drying out dead bodies and hanging them on display lasted until 1881, when this grotesque method of burial was outlawed, with one exception. 2-year-old Rosalia Lombardo died in 1920. When she fell ill, her father rushed her to the United States, where a doctor tragically failed to save her.
Her family couldn't think of the body of the little girl decomposing, so this doctor injected chemicals into the body of little Rosalia, and these chemicals have preserved her until today.
For over 80 years now, she has looked as if she is peacefully asleep. Nobody has ever discovered how the American doctor managed to preserve the body for so long.
He never told anybody what these chemicals were. He never told anybody his secret, and he passed away without telling us.
Whether you visit the Capuchin crypts of Rome or the catacombs of Palermo, be prepared to be shocked. Because in Italy, the dead don't want to be forgotten, and they're waiting for you to join them. Finally, on Incredible Catacombs, we go to Egypt, to Cairo, and discover the secret behind one of the world's most famous sites, the pyramids. Thought by many to be the world's biggest tombs. For over 4,000 years, these enormous structures have aroused awe and speculation in all that have seen them. There have been many extraordinary theories about how the 50-story pyramids were built. Some even believe they were made by aliens. That was until the truth was discovered by an American tourist just a mile away from the pyramids themselves.
One day in August, it was very hot. At 12 noon, the chief of the guards came to me and he said, "Sir, there is an American lady was riding a horse, and the leg of the horse fell in a hole and discovered a small mud brick wall." I went there, and when I looked at it, I said, "I found it. This is the tombs of the pyramid builders."
Up until this accidental discovery, there were conflicting theories about exactly who had built the pyramids, Martians or slaves.
It was like a gun in my hand to tell the people that I do have now the tombs actually discovered of those who built the pyramids. Then they will forget all these crazy theories about people came out of the space and Atlantis and all these things.
History now had to be rewritten.
Of course, the discovery of the tombs of the pyramid builders is very important to the public for two important reasons. The first one, that the pyramids built by the Egyptians. And the second, that the pyramids were not built by slaves.
An important piece of evidence that the builders were not slaves is that they were buried in the pyramid style of their kings. And the fact that they had been hidden for so long meant that their simple mud brick tombs had remained intact. The graves that have been opened by archaeologists contain only bones and a few broken shards of pottery.
You know, those people, they want to have a nice life in the afterlife. And therefore, this is a part of a beer jar. They want to drink beer in the afterlife. And we know that the ancient Egyptian had 5 kinds of beer. Each kind had a name. And therefore, the most important thing for a workman is to drink beer in the morning, in the afternoon, and the evening. That's the power that pushed him to move a stone.
Undeniably, the work was hard. Skeletons removed for scientific analysis show that stress on the workers' backs resulted in backbones that were severely distorted. Their injuries were treated, further evidence that they were not slaves.
The bones and the skeletons and the skulls that we discovered, it revealed to us lots of secrets. The most important secret that we found out is the discovery of a skull, that we found that this man had a brain surgery and he lived for 2 years after that. Can we imagine a workman that a doctor will come and will make for him a brain surgery? And we found that the average age of death of those people were 30 to 35.
The secrets discovered beneath the earth had unraveled part of the mystery surrounding these overground marvels, revealing an important part of the history behind some of the greatest achievements in the world. Our last stop in Egypt is Gorna, an ancient area west of Luxor. Every tourist has heard of the Valley of the Kings, but Gorna has even more amazing secrets concealed beneath this stunning landscape. When ancient civilizations moved to this area, they came across a series of abandoned tombs. Unbelievably, they decided to transform them into their homes.
The people who have come here have always lived close to the dead. They've lived in proximity to the tombs of their ancestors and of their own families. And they set up their households there and expanded over time.
The crumbling village of El Gorna is built above 350 of these tombs. Even today, people continue to live here. Up until very recently, Ibrahim Rabba lived here on top of the tombs. He invited us into his former home.
This is my house here where I born and where I live. This is the bed I used to live here 5 years ago, but it's falling down as you see because nobody taking care of it.
His ordinary mud brick house conceals an extraordinary secret. His family lived much closer to the dead than others.
The most interesting things about this house here, the tombs, which has a big tombs inside. Yeah. Come and have a look, see the tombs here.
Up until 50 years ago, Ibrahim's family actually lived inside these 4,000-year-old tombs.
And my grandparents, they used to live here, my parents. And now, you see, it's all the smoke. This is the smoke from living. They used to cook here and make a fire inside.
So what made this burial chamber a desirable home?
All the tombs here, they are cooler in the summer. And in winter time, they are warm. So that's why the idea of living in here, because of the air conditioning. Natural air conditioning.
Later, in more prosperous times, they built a house above ground, but still used the tomb to store food. 5 years ago, Ibrahim and his family decided the time had come to wave goodbye to their tomb with a view. The Egyptian authorities wanted to excavate the area, and Ibrahim wanted a place with running water. Their old home has since gone to ruin. But it seems that once you've lived in a tomb, nothing else will do.
Peaceful, not like the city, all these cars. I prefer living in the tombs than living in the city.
You have seen the world's most incredible catacombs. Secret treasures buried deep beneath the earth. The bizarre burial practices of the past. And the scariest way to spend a night. All this awaits you and more when you travel beneath the surface.